Jude had processed 6,000 alpha samples in 3 years without feeling a thing. That was the whole point of hiring a beta for the high concentration line. Betas did not react. Betas were safe. He uncapped donor 7741 at 2:30 on a Monday afternoon, and his body started producing a scent it had never had before. Wet slate and torn marjoram, rising off his wrists and throat while the pheromone alarm screamed above him and his knees hit the floor. 24 years old, beta on every panel he had ever taken, presenting as omega in the middle of a sterile lab because of one vial that should never have reached his station. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I read every comment. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. 3 days earlier, the lab had been the safest place Jude knew. He arrived every morning at 6:45, 15 minutes before his shift, because the building was quiet at that hour and the autoclave had time to finish its cycle before the first samples arrived. The routine was sacred. Badge in. Coffee from the machine on the second floor, black, no sugar. Lab coat from his locker, the one with his name stitched above the left pocket in thread that had faded from navy to something closer to gray. Gloves, goggles, station check, and then the work. Genera Diagnostics did alpha fertility work and designation compatibility testing. Hundreds of samples a day. Everything from basic pheromone panels to genetic sequencing for bonding compatibility. Jude loved it the way some people love crosswords. Every sample was a small problem with a clean answer. He had been doing this since he graduated from Hunter College with a degree in clinical laboratory science. 3 years, 6 days a week, and in that time he had built a reputation as the most reliable tech on the processing floor. No contamination incidents. No mislabeled slides, no errors in chain of custody. His supervisor had once told him, only half joking, that the lab's accreditation basically rested on his shoulders. The other techs were a mix of betas and bonded omegas whose heat cycles were regulated enough for lab clearance. The betas rotated stations freely. The omegas worked the lower concentration lines, processing blood panels and genetic swabs that carried minimal pheromone load. Only Jude worked the high-concentration alpha sample line, the one that handled raw reproductive material at full pheromone potency. He was good at it because he felt nothing. Other techs talked about what it was like to catch a whiff of concentrated alpha off a vial. The omegas described it like a hook in the belly. The other betas said it was like smelling strong perfume, noticeable but harmless. Jude got nothing. Flat zero. He could open a rut phase sample at 30 times normal concentration and his pulse would stay where it was. The automated analyzer once flagged a fated match study sample as a contaminant because the bonding markers were so dense, and Jude had processed it like it was tap water. His boss loved him for it. The absence of reaction was the most valuable thing about him. Outside the lab, his life was organized with the same precision. A one-bedroom apartment in Astoria, clean and spare, furnished with what he needed and nothing more. Groceries on Sundays, laundry on Wednesdays. A standing reservation at a soup counter on Steinway Street every other Friday, where the owner, an elderly beta woman named Mrs. Cho, saved him the seat by the window and never asked questions about why he always came alone. He had friends. He had a life. But if you asked him what mattered most, he would have said the lab without hesitating. Beta. The kind of person nobody looks at twice, and proud of it. The Monday had started like any other. Jude badged in, got his coffee, checked his station. The sample queue for the day was standard. 42 alpha reproductive panels, 18 compatibility screens, and 1 flagged sample that had been rerouted from an outside facility. The flagged sample was donor 7741. The routing paperwork listed it as a transfer from a research program at Meridian Biotech, Genera's parent company. The notes said alpha reproductive panel, full spectrum, priority processing, nothing about a research hold, nothing about a QC review, just another sample in the queue. He logged it into the queue and moved on with his morning. The first 42 samples processed without incident. The compatibility screens ran clean. By 2 in the afternoon, Jude was ahead of schedule, which happened often enough that he used the extra time to recalibrate the centrifuge and update the batch tracking spreadsheet he maintained on his own time, because the official system was badly designed and nobody else cared enough to fix it. At 2:30, the flagged sample reached the front of his queue. He pulled it from the thermal carrier. The vial looked almost normal. Standard cryovial, standard size. But the label was wrong. Instead of a printed barcode from Genera's tracking system, someone had stuck on a handwritten alphanumeric tag, the kind research facilities used for internal studies that had not been entered into a shared database yet. And there was a yellow flag sticker on the cap that read C9, which meant high concentration alpha material, rut phase protocol, extra ventilation, double-sealed hood, nitrile over latex gloves. What the vial did not have was a research hold tag. Sigh. Somewhere between Meridian's outgoing shipment and Genera's intake desk, the routing flag that was supposed to keep this sample in the research queue under the supervision of Dr. Aldous, Genera's head of research, had been stripped off. The intake tech had logged it as a standard panel, assigned it a queue number, and sent it down to the processing floor. To Jude. He prepped his station accordingly, set the hood to maximum extraction, and opened the vial. Later, in the medical wing, a doctor named Moss spoke to him in the careful voice people used when they were about to change your life and wanted you to stay calm while they did it. "Your panels are coming back consistent with late-onset omega presentation," she said. "Full designation shift. The pheromone output we measured in the lab is in line with initial presentation in a previously latent omega." Jude sat on the examination table in a paper gown. His lab coat was sealed in a biohazard bag because his scent had saturated the fabric. His hands were clasped in his lap, perfectly still, because if he let them move, they would shake, and he could not afford to shake right now. "I'm 24, he said. "Presentation happens during puberty. 13, 14, 15. Not 24. Late presentation is rare but documented," Dr. Moss said. "There are roughly 200 confirmed cases in the medical literature. Most are triggered by extreme physiological stress, illness, or," she paused, checking her tablet, "by exposure to a highly compatible alpha's concentrated pheromone signature." The room was very quiet. "You're saying a sample did this to me. I'm saying your body was already primed for presentation, latent designation. It happens. Some people carry omega or alpha markers that never activate because the right trigger never occurs. In your case, the trigger appears to have been a specific sample. Donor 7741. Dr. Moss hesitated. "The sample has been secured and flagged for analysis. Dr. Aldous has been notified." "What happens to me?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You'll need to be reclassified. Your designation status with the state registry will be updated. You'll be assigned a transition counselor, and your lab clearance," she slowed down on this part, "will need to be reviewed." There it was. The thing he had been bracing for since the alarm went off. "I can't work the alpha line. An unbonded omega cannot process high-concentration alpha samples. It's a safety regulation. I'm sorry, Jude." He looked at his hands, still steady. Still the same hands that had processed 6,000 samples without a single error. The same hands on a different person now. "How long do I have before the reclassification goes through?" "The state processes designation changes within 72 hours of medical confirmation." 3 days. He had 3 days left as himself. Dr. Moss left him alone after that. He sat on the examination table and stared at the wall. He knew he should feel something. Grief, maybe. Anger. Fear. All he could find was a kind of blank, ringing emptiness, like the seconds after a car crash when the engine is still ticking, and you are checking your own body for damage and not finding any, which almost makes it worse. His phone buzzed. A message from Marin. "Hey, how are you holding up? Don't worry about the rest of your shift. I've got the line covered. Take care of yourself." He typed back, "Fine, thanks." And then he sat there for another 20 minutes before he could make himself stand up. The next morning, Jude arrived at work at 6:45, same as always. Marin found him at his station, already gloved and goggled, processing the overnight samples that had queued up during his absence. "Jude," she stood in the doorway with her arms folded. "You were cleared for medical leave. I'm not sick. You presented as Omega yesterday in the middle of the lab. And today I'm processing samples. The queue doesn't clear itself." She looked at him for a long moment. He could tell she wanted to argue. He could also tell she could smell him now, the wet slate and marjoram that he could not suppress because he did not have suppressants yet. Because Omega suppressants required a prescription that required a confirmed designation that required the reclassification that had not yet gone through. He was stuck in an administrative gap, smelling like something new and raw and unmistakably Omega, and pretending it wasn't happening. "Fine," Marin said, "but I'm pulling you off the alpha line. You're on genetic panels today. Beta concentration work only." He kept his mouth shut because she was right, and because the alternative was going home to his apartment and sitting in the silence with the full weight of what had happened to him, and he was not ready for that. The reclassification went through on Thursday, 71 hours after his presentation. He opened the state registry portal on his phone during his lunch break and watched his designation update in real time. Beta with the little gray indicator dot. Then the page refreshed and the dot turned amber and the word beside it read Omega, and his sandwich sat untouched on the table for the rest of the hour. His suppressant prescription came through Friday morning. Dr. Moss wrote it for a standard dose inhibitor called Quilara, which was the most commonly prescribed first-line suppressant for late-presenting omegas. It would take 4 to 6 days to reach full efficacy. In the meantime, she warned, his scent output would remain elevated, and his heat cycle, which his body was now preparing for with the urgency of 24 years of biological backlog, could arrive within 2 to 3 weeks. He filled the prescription at the pharmacy on Broadway, standing in a line that was designed for Omegas who had been managing this their entire lives. The pharmacist did not look twice at him. Nobody did. He was just another Omega picking up suppressants on a Friday afternoon, except he had never been this before. Marin reassigned him permanently to the genetic panel line. His alpha sample clearance was revoked, which meant his access to the high-concentration processing wing was cut, which meant the specialized work that had defined his career for 3 years was no longer his. He was moved to a shared station in the general processing area between a bonded Omega named Yara, who smiled too much, and a Beta named Cal, who chewed gum with his mouth open and miscalibrated his pipettes at least twice a week. Jude kept showing up. 6:45, station check, panels, spreadsheet, home. Same loop, tighter now. Different station, different clearance. Complaining would not change any of it. On Monday of the following week, he went to the break room at 11 for coffee and found it empty. Word had gotten around. People were avoiding the room when he was in it, the way you step around a coworker who just got bad news and you do not know what to say. He was pouring his coffee when the break room door opened and a scent walked in that nearly dropped him. Cold limestone. Burnt sage. The sharpness before the first snow. His coffee cup hit the counter hard enough to chip. His body reacted before his brain caught up, his scent punching outward in a rush. He gripped the counter and turned. The man in the doorway was tall, wide-shouldered, dark hair that needed a cut, gray-green eyes that were already locked on Jude before Jude had finished turning around. He wore a suit with no tie and carried himself like someone who had stopped noticing rooms full of people a long time ago. He was the donor. Jude knew it instantly. Not a thought. A fact. The way your body knows a fall before your eyes confirm it. This was the source. The alpha whose concentrated pheromones had torn him open a week ago was standing in the doorway of the break room. The man's nostrils flared, his pupils dilated visibly, the gray-green irises shrinking to thin rings. He took one step into the break room and then stopped, his hand catching the doorframe, knuckles white. For 3 seconds, neither of them breathed. "You." The man's voice was low, tight, like he was talking through his teeth. "You're the one from the lab." Jude's throat was so tight he could barely speak. "Who are you?" "Grant Bayek. I'm the new chief research officer." His gaze tracked down to Jude's wrist, where the scent gland was visible above his glove line, swollen and flushed. "And I think we need to talk." Jude pulled his hand behind his back. "I have nothing to say to you." "Your body disagrees." The bluntness of it hit like a slap. Jude felt his face go hot, felt the humiliation of his own biology responding in real time to this stranger's presence. His scent was intensifying against his will, the marjoram sharpening, the amber surfacing from underneath, and he could see Grant's jaw tighten as it reached him. "I need you to leave," Jude said. His voice shook on the last word, and he hated it. "Right now." Grant did not move. His grip on the doorframe had not relaxed. The tendons in his forearm stood in sharp relief, and Jude realized with a start that the alpha was holding himself back, physically restraining his own body from stepping closer. "I know what happened to you," Grant said quietly. "I've read the incident report. My sample triggered your presentation, and I know that what you're feeling right now, what we're both feeling right now, is a compatibility response. A strong one. I don't care what it is. I care that a week ago I was a beta with a career and a life I understood, and now I can't walk into a break room without my own body betraying me." Huh. Grant's face changed. The clinical distance fell away, and underneath it Jude caught a flash of real pain. "I know what it feels like to lose who you thought you were," Grant said. "More than you think." Then he let go of the door frame, took a deliberate step backward, and left. Jude stood in the empty break room, his coffee cooling on the counter, his pulse still going. The scent of limestone and burnt sage lingered in the air long after Grant was gone, and his body wanted to follow it out the door. That was the part that scared him. He went back to his station and processed 37 genetic panels without a single error. His hand still worked. That had to count for something. But the scent stayed with him. He could taste it at the back of his tongue all afternoon, and when he got home and hung up his lab coat, the fabric still carried it. And that night, alone in his apartment in Astoria, lying on sheets that smelled only of detergent and himself, Jude pressed his face into his pillow and refused to cry, because crying would mean accepting it, and acceptance was still a long way off. Grant Bayek was everywhere. As the new chief research officer, he occupied the glass-walled office on the 4th floor that overlooked the entire processing lab. Jude could see him from his station if he looked up, which he tried not to do. Grant spent his first week in meetings with Dr. Aldis and the research division heads, his days a blur of presentations and facility tours and introductions. Jude watched from his station and told himself he was not watching. But the building was only so big. They crossed paths in the elevator on Tuesday. Jude pressed himself against the back wall. Grant stood at the front, his shoulders rigid, his scent tightly controlled but still leaking at the edges. Limestone and sage pooling in the enclosed space until Jude's fingers trembled. Neither spoke. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, Jude stepped out and walked directly to the nearest restroom and ran cold water over his wrists until the flushing faded. They crossed paths in the parking garage on Wednesday. Grant was getting into a dark gray sedan. Jude was unlocking his bicycle. Their eyes met across 30 feet of concrete, and Jude's knees went soft. He grabbed the bike rack. Grant's hand froze on his car door. They stayed like that, stuck, until Jude looked away first and rode off. On Thursday, Grant came to the processing floor. He was touring the facility with Dr. Aldis, clipboard in hand, asking detailed questions about throughput capacity and quality control metrics. The tour was scheduled, posted on the department calendar, entirely expected. Jude had known about it since Monday and had arranged to take his lunch break during the window when the tour would pass his station. His timing was off by 12 minutes. He was returning from the break room when Grant's group rounded the corner. Dr. Aldis was explaining the sample tracking system, gesturing at the equipment. Grant was nodding, attentive, professional, and then his head turned. Not fast, not dramatic, just turned, like his neck had made the decision without consulting the rest of him, and he looked directly at Jude. The corridor was narrow. Jude could not pass without coming within arm's length of him. He kept walking, head down, hands in his coat pockets. He passed so close that their shoulders nearly brushed, and Grant's scent hit him like walking into freezing water. His own scent rose in answer, the marjoram sharpening, the amber breaking through the suppressants that had not yet reached full strength. Grant's step faltered. Jude heard it, the slight hitch in stride, the catch of breath. Dr. Aldis glanced back, confused. "Dr. Beck? Everything all right?" "Fine." Grant's voice was taut. "Continue." Jude made it to his station, sat down, and gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles ached. His body was trembling in fine, invisible waves. A vibration below the skin that felt like standing too close to a third rail. His body wanted Grant. That was what it came down to. Grant was necessary according to whatever rewired part of Jude's brain was now running the show, and Jude's actual opinion was not being consulted. He hated it. Hated that a vial he had opened as part of his job had rewritten who he was. Hated that a stranger's pheromones had done more damage to his life in 30 seconds than anything else in 24 years. And he hated, most of all, that it felt good. That somewhere underneath the grief and the fury, the omega part of him, the new part, had already decided that Grant's scent meant safe. The wanting was the cruelest part. Friday evening, Mrs. Cho saved his window seat at the soup counter as usual. She set down his bowl and paused, studying him with the quiet attention of someone who had been watching people for 60 years. "Something changed," she said. "I'm fine." Jude picked up his spoon. "I didn't say you weren't." She wiped the counter with a cloth that was already clean. "Just said something changed. You smell different." He looked up sharply. "Mrs." Cho shrugged. "My nose still works, even for a beta." A pause. "Or what used to be a beta." His spoon went still. "You can tell? Whetstone and herbs. Underneath it something sweet trying to hide. That's not a beta scent, dear." Jude's jaw tightened. He stared at his bowl. "World treats it like an ending," Mrs. Cho said, filling his water glass. "It's not. It's just a new fact. You add it to the pile and you keep going. That's what people do." She moved on to her other customers. Jude ate his soup and thought about the pile of facts that made up his life, and the new one sitting on top that refused to fit with any of the others. If you're enjoying the story, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I read every single one. All right, let's get back to the story. The following Monday, Jude's suppressants reached full efficacy. His scent dampened to trace levels, his body temperature stabilized, and the low-grade flush faded. He almost felt like himself again. Almost. Because normal did not include the transition counselor appointment his insurance now required, or the stack of designation reclassification forms on his kitchen table, or the new section on his medical chart labeled Omega Health, Heat Cycle Management. He went to work. He processed panels, he kept his head down, and then Grant asked to see him. The request came through official channels, a meeting invitation from the CRO's office, CECE, to Dr. Aldis and Marin. Subject line: regarding incident report from October 14th. Jude stared at it for 5 full minutes before accepting. The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock in Grant's office. Jude arrived at 2:58 because being early meant being in control of at least one thing. Grant was already there, standing behind his desk rather than sitting, which Jude registered as a deliberate choice. Standing offered distance. Sitting invited proximity. "Close the door," Grant said. Jude closed it, closed. The office smelled like recirculated air and coffee, and underneath both, Grant's scent, muted by what Jude guessed was his own suppressant regimen, but still present. Limestone, burnt sage, the air before snow. Jude sat in the chair across the desk without being asked. "What do you want?" Grant's mouth thinned. He was holding a file folder, and Jude could see that his grip on it was too tight. Knuckles edged white beneath the skin. "I want to tell you what donor 7741 is." Jude waited. "It's mine." Grant set the folder on the desk. "The sample that triggered your presentation was mine. I'm the donor." "I know." Grant's eyes narrowed. "How?" "I smelled it, in the break room, the first time we met. Your scent matches the sample." The air between them went thick. Grant nodded slowly. "Then you understand the situation." "I understand that your pheromone sample rewrote my entire biological identity without my consent." "Yes." No flinching. No excuses. "And I need you to understand why it was in your lab at all." He opened the folder and turned it toward Jude. Inside were research abstracts, densely printed, with passages highlighted in blue. "I've spent the last 7 years studying compatibility-triggered designation shifts. Late presentation in latent carriers, specifically omega presentation triggered by exposure to a genetically matched alpha's pheromone signature at high concentration. My research at Meridian was the most advanced program of its kind. The sample that reached your lab was part of a controlled study I was running on trigger thresholds." Jude looked at the abstracts, then at Grant. "You sent your own pheromone sample to a processing lab knowing it could trigger presentation in a latent carrier?" "No." Grant's voice hardened. "The sample was supposed to stay within the research wing at Meridian. When it transferred to Gennara, the research hold tag got lost in intake processing. Someone logged it as a standard panel and sent it to the general queue. A routing error." "Yes. A routing error ended my career." Grant was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, he sounded different. Lower. Stripped of the clinical detachment. "My brother was a latent omega. He presented at 19 after prolonged exposure to an alpha who knew exactly what he was doing. The alpha forced the presentation deliberately, used his own concentrated pheromones to trigger it because he wanted to bond with an omega who couldn't fight back during the presentation crisis." Jude's breath caught. David didn't survive the forced bonding. His body rejected it. Presentation shock combined with an unwanted bond sent him into omega drop, and he never came out of it. Grant's jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood in sharp relief. He was in a coma for 8 days. He died on the 9th. The office was very quiet. Outside the glass walls, the lab hummed and beeped with the sounds of ordinary work. Inside, the air felt thin. "I started this research because I wanted to understand how it happened, how a single alpha's pheromones could trigger a latent presentation. And more than that, whether it could be predicted, prevented, or," he paused, "reversed." "Reversed," Jude repeated. "A reversal protocol, a way to stabilize a latent carrier's designation before an unwanted trigger could activate it. Or, in cases where presentation has already occurred, a way to," he searched for the right words, "give the person a choice, whether to accept the new designation or return to their baseline." Jude stared at him. It took a few seconds for all of it to land. "You're telling me there might be a way to undo this. I'm telling you it's what I've been working toward for 7 years. And I'm telling you that your case, an accidental presentation triggered by a known donor's sample under controlled lab conditions, is the closest anyone has ever come to the circumstances my research needs to prove the theory. A beat passed. Jude felt something loosen in his chest. Under all the biology, under the scent response, a thought he had been refusing to have. That maybe this did not have to be permanent. "Is that why you took the CRO position here?" he asked. "Because of me?" Grant held his gaze. "I took the position because Meridian transferred the research program to Genera 3 months ago, and I came with it. Your presentation happened after I was already hired." A pause. "But when I read the incident report, when I realized what my sample had done, I requested an expedited start date." "Yes. Because of your research. Because of you." They both heard the slip. Grant's jaw tightened and he looked away. "The research," he corrected, "because of the research opportunity your case represents." But Jude had heard the first answer, and so had the part of him that tracked Grant's face now, whether he wanted it to or not. He stood. The chair scraped the floor. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Jude walked to the door. His hand was on the handle when Grant's voice stopped him. "Jude." He did not turn around. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth. I'm sorry my carelessness cost you your life." "It didn't cost me my life," Jude said, and his voice held. "It cost me the person I was. That's worse." He left the glass office and took the stairs instead of the elevator and walked out of the building into the late afternoon air, where the city smelled like rain and exhaust and nothing personal, nothing biological, nothing that could reach inside him and rearrange who he was. He sat on the bench by the parking garage and breathed. 2 weeks passed. Jude processed genetic panels and attended his transition counselor appointments and filled his suppressant prescription and did not think about Grant Back's research except when he was lying awake at 3 in the morning, and then he thought about nothing else. The possibility of reversal gnawed at him. A way back. A door that might still open onto the life he had lost. He caught himself weighing it during quiet moments at his station, turning it over like a coin in his hand. Would he take it? If Grant's protocol worked, if the science was real, would he choose to go back to being a beta? The question was harder than it should have been, and the reason it was harder was Grant. Because despite the suppressants, despite his best efforts, despite the careful distance he maintained whenever Grant was on the processing floor, the compatibility response had not faded. It had gone underground. Instead of the acute, overwhelming reaction of the break room, it had settled into something chronic and persistent. A low hum in his blood that got louder whenever Grant's scent leaked through the ventilation from upstairs. He caught himself doing things he had no explanation for. Pausing mid-pipette when the air shifted. Looking up at Grant's office before his brain could stop his eyes. Lying in bed at night, suppressants humming in his bloodstream, body quiet and controlled, and still pressing his nose into his own wrist, searching for a trace of cold limestone and burnt sage that was never there. Desire was part of it. But desire was the easy word for what was actually happening. Jude's biology had tagged Grant Bayek as match, full stop, and no pill was going to overwrite that. 5 weeks after his presentation, Jude's suppressants failed for the first time. It happened at 3 in the afternoon, at his station, with no warning. One moment he was pipetting a genetic panel, steady-handed and focused, and the next his temperature spiked so fast his vision blurred. His scent punched through the suppressant barrier in a wave of wet slate and warm amber, and the pheromone sensors at his station triggered immediately. Marin was across the floor. She looked up at the alarm, saw Jude gripping his counter, and moved fast. Isolation room, now, come on. The isolation room was a small, windowless space on the 2nd floor, designed for Omega employees experiencing preheat breakthrough. It had a locked door, scent-neutral air filtration, a cot, and a panic button. Marin guided him inside, her hand firm on his arm. Her beta steadiness was the only thing keeping him upright. Breathe. Your suppressants probably need a dosage adjustment. This happens with late presenters. Your body is still calibrating. She was right. He knew she was right. But what was rolling through him was nothing like what he had imagined preheat would feel like. It was not the diffuse, manageable warmth the transition counselor had described. It was targeted, directional. Every wave of it pointed upward, toward Grant's office, toward the source. "I'm going to call Dr. Moss," Marin said. "Stay here. Keep the door locked. I'll be back in 10 minutes. She left. The lock clicked. Jude lay on the cot and pressed his forearm across his eyes and tried to breathe through the fire eating its way through his nervous system. Someone knocked on the door. "Go away, Marin. I'm fine." It's not Marin. Grant's voice on the other side of the door, low and controlled and close. Jude's body reacted instantly. His back arched off the cot. His scent surged, the amber flooding through the wet slate, and he heard himself make a sound that was half gasp, half groan, involuntary and humiliating. "Don't come in." He barely recognized his own voice. "Grant, do not open that door." "I won't. I'm not going to open it." A pause. "The pheromone alarm triggered on my floor. I could feel it. I could feel you through the ventilation system. Then go back upstairs." "I can't." The raw honesty in those two words cut through everything. "My body won't let me. I've been pacing my office for 5 minutes trying to override it, and I can't. The best I can do is stay on this side of the door." Jude pressed his face into the cot's thin pillow. His skin was damp. His pulse thudded in his throat. His wrists, the scent glands that he had not even known he possessed 3 weeks ago. "Talk to me," he managed. "If you're going to stand there, talk. Distract me." A long exhale from the hallway, then Grant's voice, roughened but controlled. "David loved puzzles. That's what I think about when things get bad. He could do a 1,000-piece jigsaw in a single sitting. Used to spread them out on the kitchen floor and work through the night. I'd find him asleep at 6 in the morning with his face resting on a half-finished landscape." Jude listened. The preheat was still roaring through him, but Grant's voice was a point of focus, something to hold on to. He wanted to be a teacher, elementary school. He used to say that kids were the only honest people left. A pause. He was 17 when he presented. 19 when he died. "I'm sorry." The words came out thin and shaking. "I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry about your career." Grant's voice was very close to the door now, as though he had pressed himself against it. "I'm sorry about every morning you walk into that lab and sit at the wrong station. I'm sorry my carelessness did that. It was a routing error. I should have caught it. I should have triple-checked. I know what my pheromones can do. That's the whole point of the research, and I still let a vial of my own concentrated sample end up in a general processing queue." Jude's fingers curled into the pillow. The preheat was cresting. His body felt split down the center, half of it screaming for relief and the other half leaning toward the voice on the other side of the door, and he gritted his teeth against both. "Tell me about the puzzles again," he whispered. So Grant told him. About David's favorite puzzles, the ones with too much sky. About the way he would hum while he worked, off-key and unconscious of it. About the kitchen floor covered in tiny cardboard pieces and the light from the window falling across his brother's concentrated face. The preheat episode lasted 40 minutes. Dr. Moss arrived with an emergency suppressant booster that brought the wave under control, and by the time Jude's body temperature normalized, Grant was gone from the hallway, but the pillow on the isolation room cot smelled like both of them. Wet slate and limestone, marjoram and burnt sage, amber and snow, mixed together through a locked door into a scent that did not belong to either of them alone. After the isolation room, Jude stopped fighting it. Not a decision. His body just ran out of resistance. Turns out you can only white-knuckle your way through a biological imperative for so long before your grip gives. He stopped avoiding the elevator, stopped timing his brakes to miss Grant's floor tours, stopped running cold water over his wrists every time the ventilation carried a whisper of limestone and sage from upstairs. He just let it be there. The pull, the hum, knowing exactly where Grant was in the building at any given moment without trying to. And Grant, for his part, stopped pretending he did not feel it either. It started with small things. A coffee that appeared on Jude's station one morning, still warm, with a sticky note that said nothing except the letter G. A research paper slipped under the break room door during Jude's lunch, highlighted in blue about late-presenting omegas who had successfully maintained their professional certifications post-reclassification. A dosage adjustment recommendation forwarded from Grant's personal endocrinologist, unsigned, as though it had materialized from thin air. Jude accepted all of it without comment and returned nothing. Accepting was one thing. Giving something back would mean admitting this was becoming a two-way street, and he was not there yet. 3 weeks after the isolation room, Dr. Moss adjusted his suppressants to a higher dose formulation. The preheat breakthrough had rattled her, and she wanted more margin. The new dosage worked. His scent leveled off. His body stopped throwing heat flares, but the wanting did not fade. On a Thursday in late November, Jude stayed late to recalibrate the spectrophotometer that Cal had jammed by loading a sample tray backward. The processing floor was empty. The overhead lights had switched to their after-hours setting, half-brightness casting the rows of equipment in gray-blue shadow. He heard the elevator open, heard footsteps on the linoleum. Did not look up from the spectrophotometer's display panel because he already knew who it was. His body had registered Grant's scent before the elevator doors had fully parted. "It's 8 o'clock, Grant said. He was standing at the end of Jude's row, jacket off, tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. The scent of him, no longer filtered through ventilation or diluted by a crowded floor, filled the aisle between the workstations. Cal broke the spectrophotometer. Again. Cal breaks everything. Come eat. I'm not hungry. Your stomach has been growling for the last 45 minutes. I can hear it from the 4th floor. Jude looked up. You can't actually hear my stomach from the 4th floor. No, but I can hear you lying about it from 4 feet away. Jude almost smiled. He caught it, pressed it flat, turned back to the display. I need to finish this. Grant did not answer right away. He walked to the adjacent workstation, pulled up a stool, and sat down. Gave Jude room, just sat there reading his phone, not talking, not pushing, just there. Jude finished the recalibration in 11 minutes. He powered down the spectrophotometer, logged the maintenance in the system, and turned to find Grant watching him. Not watching his face, watching his hands. What? Your hands, Grant said. When you work, they move differently than when you're doing anything else. More precisely, like every millimeter is deliberate. That's because every millimeter is deliberate. I know, that's what I'm saying. Grant's voice had gone quieter. You're extraordinary at this. You know that. His eyes burned. He blinked it away. I was extraordinary at the Alpha line. This is panel work. Any tech with 6 months of training can do what I'm doing now. That's not true. It is true. And you know it is. Because the whole reason your research matters is that people like me lose everything when they present. Careers, clearances, professional identities. I was the best Alpha Line tech in the tri-state area. Now I'm recalibrating equipment that a sophomore broke. Neither of them spoke. The quiet had teeth this time. Grant stood. He picked up his jacket, and then, instead of leaving, He crossed the 4 feet between them and stopped close enough that Jude could feel the warmth coming off his body. "I am going to fix this," Grant said quietly. "My research can change what happened to you. Give you the choice you were never given. But I need time, and I need you to believe that I am not going to stop until it's done." Jude looked up at him. Grant's face was very close. Close enough that the limestone and sage filled his nose and his brain stopped working properly. His scent gland pulsed at his throat. The suppressants kept the scent from leaking, but they could not touch the feeling itself. It spread from his neck down into his chest and sat there, hot and heavy. "You're too close," Jude whispered. "I know." Jude did not step back. Grant did not step forward. Grant's hand came up. Slow, obvious, giving Jude every chance to move. His finger stopped just short of Jude's jaw. "Tell me to stop," Grant said. Jude's mouth opened. No words came out. Grant's thumb brushed the underside of Jude's jaw. One touch. Barely there. And every nerve Jude had fired at once. His scent blew past the suppressants in a hot burst of marjoram and amber. His pupils went wide, and his breath caught so loud in the empty lab that both of them heard it. Grant's hand trembled. The tendons in his wrist stood tight. He pulled his hand back as though Jude's skin had burned him and stepped away. "I'm sorry." He sounded wrecked. "That was a line I said I wouldn't cross." Jude stood there. His jaw still felt the ghost of Grant's thumb. His whole body was shaking, and he could not make it stop. "Don't apologize," he said. "That's worse." Grant left. Jude stood in the dark lab for 10 minutes before his legs were steady enough to walk to his bicycle. That night, he lay in his apartment in Astoria, his suppressants doing their work, his scent muted, his body temperature normal, and he pressed his fingers to the underside of his own jaw where Grant's thumb had been and held them there until he fell asleep. The fight went out of him after that. Not all at once. Bit by bit. The coffee notes became texts. The texts became shared lunches. The shared lunches became something that had a shape neither of them was naming yet. Jude started eating lunch on the 4th floor, not in Grant's office. In the break room on his floor, which happened to be 20 feet away, which happened to have a sight line to the table where Jude sat with his sandwich and his spreadsheets. They did not speak during these lunches, but Grant looked up from his desk every few minutes, and Jude looked up from his spreadsheet at roughly the same intervals, and their eyes caught and held for 2 or 3 seconds before both of them went back to what they were doing. It was maddening, and it was the best part of his day. He would never have admitted that to anyone, least of all himself. On a rainy Friday in November, Mrs. Cho's place was closed for a plumbing repair. Jude stood on Steinway Street with his hands in his pockets, looking at the darkened windows, feeling more lost than a closed restaurant should have made him. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he did not have saved but recognized from the internal directory. The message read, "There's a place on McDougal that does a burger worth losing your mind over, if you don't have plans." Jude stared at the text for 30 seconds. He typed back, "I don't have plans." The reply was immediate. 15 minutes. "I'll be the one who looks like he hasn't been outside in 6 weeks. Jude laughed, actually laughed, standing alone on Steinway Street in the rain. He could not remember the last time he had done that. Grant was already at the restaurant when Jude arrived, seated in a corner booth, and he looked up when Jude walked in with an expression that made Jude's sternum ache. Softer than hunger, more vulnerable than the alpha response Jude had learned to recognize. Just relief. Plain human relief at seeing him walk through the door. They ordered. They ate. They talked about things that had nothing to do with designation science or laboratory clearances, or the word omega. Grant had grown up in Philly. His mother was still there, still running the small accounting practice she had started after Grant's father left when Grant was 11. He had a cat named Hector who only responded to the sound of a can opener. He ran 5 miles every morning because the rhythm helped him think, and he read murder mysteries before bed because they were the only genre that shut his brain off completely. Jude told him about Mrs. Cho and the window seat, about the spreadsheet he maintained for genera that nobody had asked him to create, about how he had wanted to be a marine biologist until he found out it involved boats, and he got seasick so badly that he once threw up on a whale-watching tour before the boat left the dock. Grant laughed at that. A real laugh, deep and surprised, and the sound of it hit Jude's new omega neurology like a drug. His scent gland throbbed, his face heated. He looked down at his plate and fought the urge to press his wrist against Grant's across the table, which was an urge he had never had in his life and would have found insane 3 months ago. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jude said. "Anything. Your brother, David." He saw Grant's expression shift, the laughter draining out. "How did you survive losing him?" Grant turned his water glass in his fingers for a while before answering. "I didn't. Not for a long time. The first year I was just angry, at the alpha who did it, at the doctors who couldn't save him, at the biology that made it possible. Then the anger burned out and what was underneath it was just," he paused, "empty. I enrolled in a doctoral program 3 weeks after the funeral because I needed to fill the space with something or it was going to eat me alive. That's not surviving. That's just staying busy." "It was at first." Grant looked at him. "Then it became purpose. And purpose eventually became enough to live on. Is it still enough?" Grant held his gaze for a long moment and Jude watched something move behind his eyes, a decision being made. "It was. Until about 6 weeks ago." Jude's breath caught. His fingers tightened around his fork. "That's not a line," Grant said quietly. "I know how it sounds, but it's not. I'm telling you the truth because you deserve the truth. What I feel about your case is not just scientific interest. I can't separate the science from the person anymore. I've tried." The restaurant was warm and full of voices and the smell of grilled meat, and Jude could not hear or taste any of it because his whole brain had locked onto the man across the table and the scent leaking through his collar, limestone and sage, warmer now than Jude had ever smelled it. "I don't know what to do with that," Jude said honestly. "Neither do I. This is complicated. It is impossibly complicated. You're the reason I'm an omega. Yes. And you're also the person I want to be around more than anyone I've ever met." Grant's hands went still on his water glass. His throat moved. "Yes," Jude said, like he was confirming something to himself. "That's the problem." They split the check. They walked out into the rain, and at the door, Jude's foot caught on the threshold, a stumble, nothing dramatic, and Grant caught his elbow, just his elbow, the sleeve of Jude's jacket between Grant's palm and his skin. But the contact sent Grant's scent spiking, the sage sharpening to something almost electric, and Jude felt it cascade through his own body like a current, his scent gland firing, the marjoram punching through his suppressants for a single bright second before the medication pulled it back under. They stood there, Grant's hand on Jude's elbow, rain beating on their shoulders, close enough that Jude could taste the sage on his next breath. "Good night, Jude." "Good night." A beat. 2. "You have to let go of my arm," Jude said. Grant looked down at his hand like he had forgotten it was there. His fingers opened. His hand dropped. "Right. Good night." Jude walked to his bicycle. He did not look back. But he knew Grant was standing in the doorway watching him ride away, because his body told him so. And his body had not been wrong about Grant yet. 2 more weeks passed. They ate together 3 times. The 4th-floor lunches became a shared joke nobody else understood. Grant left research papers on Jude's station. Jude left corrections on Grant's desk in red pen because the man's grasp of APA citation formatting was appalling for someone with a doctorate. They were running out of distance. And then, on the first Monday of December, Genera's board of directors called Grant into a meeting. Grant never said what happened in that meeting, but when he came back to the fourth floor, Jude could see it through the glass walls. Grant sat at his desk for 40 minutes without moving. His screen was dark. His hands were on the desk, palms down, fingers spread, as though he were holding something in place that wanted to fly apart. 2 days later, Jude found his name on a document. He had gone to the fourth-floor break room for lunch, same as always, and was passing Grant's open office when he saw the file on the desk. A clinical trial submission form, the kind used for human subjects in designation research, and on the participant identification line, in Grant's handwriting, Jude Yoon, Genera them ID 4721. His vision narrowed. He walked into the office without knocking. Picked up the form. Read it. Phase 2. Clinical Trial. Compatibility Triggered Designation Reversal Protocol. Primary Subject. Jude Yoon. The form had been submitted to the Institutional Review Board 3 days ago. Grant's signature was at the bottom. You enrolled me in your study. Grant stood. His face was pale. Jude, let me explain. You enrolled me in your study without my knowledge or consent. His voice was level. Too level. The kind of level that happens when every emotion fires at once and they cancel each other out. I'm a data point. That's what this has been. No. The coffee, the papers, the dinners, the hand on my jaw. Were those part of the protocol too? Getting your test subject emotionally invested so I wouldn't refuse when the consent form showed up? That is not what happened. Then explain this. He held up the form. Explain why my name is on a clinical trial I never agreed to. Grant's throat worked. His scent had gone flat. The limestone turned stale, the sage gone, and the smell of nothing where Grant's scent should have been made. Jude's stomach dropped harder than any pheromone rush ever had. The board wants to use you, Grant said. They saw the incident report. They understand the significance of your case, an accidental presentation triggered by a known donor under controlled conditions. They want to move the research into human trials immediately, and they want you as the primary subject. So you gave them what they wanted. I submitted the form to block anyone else from submitting it first. Jude went still. There are 3 other researchers at Genera with access to your medical file, Grant said, the words coming fast, tripping over each other. Any one of them could have filed a trial enrollment. The board was going to push it through regardless of whether I agreed. By submitting the form myself, under my study, I ensured that I control the protocol, the timeline, and every single condition of your involvement, including the right to withdraw at any time, including the right to refuse. You could have told me. I should have told you. You should have told me. Yes. Instead, I find my name on a form on your desk like I'm a specimen in your collection. I know what it looks like. It looks like exactly what you said your research was supposed to prevent. Someone using their position to make decisions about an omega's body without that omega's consent. The words hit. Jude watched them land, watched Grant absorb the blow of the comparison, watched his face go gray. You're right, Grant said. I did the thing I spent 7 years trying to undo. Jude set the form on the desk. His hand was shaking. I trusted you, he said. Not the researcher. Not the CRO. You. The person who sat on the other side of that door and told me about his brother's puzzles while I burned. Grant said nothing. Don't contact me outside of work. Don't leave things on my station. Don't sit in the break room where I eat lunch. Jude's voice cracked on the last sentence, but he held it together through sheer will. I am not your subject, Grant. I was never your subject. He left. He made it to the first-floor bathroom before his composure broke, and he sat on the cold tile floor with his back against the wall and his face in his hands and shook until the shaking stopped. 3 days passed. Jude went to work. He processed panels. He ate lunch at his station instead of upstairs, kept his eyes on his slides, left his phone in his locker. On the 4th day, Marin found him at his station at 6:30 in the morning, which was early even for him. "Grant resigned last night," she said. Jude's pipette stopped mid-transfer. He completed the motion, set the pipette down, and turned. "What?" "The board meeting yesterday. He told them the clinical trial was terminated. Then he told them he was destroying his research files. 7 years of data. He walked into the server room and wiped the drives himself. IT is still trying to figure out if any of it is recoverable." Jude felt the blood leave his face. He destroyed his own research? "The board is furious. They're threatening legal action. He doesn't seem to care." "Why would he do that?" Marin looked at him with something that might have been pity and might have been understanding. "I think you know why. That research was his life's work. It was everything he built after David died. Yes. He can't just throw that away. He already did. He cleaned out his office at 9 last night. Badge turned in, systems access revoked. He's gone, Jude." Jude sat very still for a long time. Then he stood up, took off his lab coat, folded it neatly over his stool, and walked out of Genera Diagnostics into the December morning. He called Grant. It rang 5 times. When Grant picked up, he sounded hollowed out. "Where are you?" Jude said. A pause. "Bench outside the place on McDougal. I didn't really know where else to go." Jude hung up and got on his bicycle. Grant was sitting on the bench with a cardboard box of office belongings at his feet and Hector the cat in a carrier beside him. Grant looked up when Jude's bicycle skidded to a stop at the curb. His face was unshaven. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who had not slept. "You destroyed your research," Jude said. He was out of breath. His chest was heaving. 7 years of work, the reversal protocol, everything. Yes. Why? Because the board was going to use it to force omegas into clinical trials whether they consented or not. Because the research was supposed to give people choices, not take them away. And because I looked at that form with your name on it, and I understood that I had become the thing I was trying to fight. So, you burned it all down. I deleted it. Burning would have been more satisfying, but harder to explain to the fire marshal. Jude stared at him. Rain was beginning, light and cold, and they stayed where they were. That protocol could have reversed my presentation. I know. It could have given me back my career, my clearance, my life. I know. And you destroyed it. Because keeping it meant treating you like data. And I would rather lose every piece of that research than spend 1 more second making you feel like a specimen. Jude's hands were shaking. His breath was coming in short bursts. The rain was picking up, plastering his hair to his forehead, and he could not think clearly because Grant was sitting there looking ruined and sincere, and his scent, the limestone and burnt sage, was raw with a pain that cut through every rational thought Jude had. "You are the most infuriating person I have ever met," Jude said. "I know. You ruined my life. I know. And then you ruined your own life trying to fix it. Also, yes, I don't want the reversal." Grant blinked. Rain ran down his face. "What?" "I don't want it. I've been thinking about it every night for 2 months, and the answer is no." Jude's voice was shaking, but the words were sure. "I don't want to go back to being a beta. Not because I've accepted being an omega. Not because I've made peace with it. But because going back would mean erasing every single thing I've felt since that vial broke me open, and some of those things," his voice cracked, "some of those things I want to keep." Grant stood up. The box of belongings stayed on the bench. The cat carrier stayed beside it. He took 1 step forward into the rain and stopped. "Which things?" he said, and his voice was barely audible. "The dinner on McDougal when you laughed and I felt it in my chest. The coffee on my station. The red pen corrections that made you send me a text at 11 at night that just said, 'You're right about the semicolons.' The door. You on the other side of the door talking about puzzles, staying when you didn't have to." He was crying. Jude was crying in the rain outside a closed restaurant at 7 in the morning, and it was absurd, and he did not care. "I want to keep you," he said. "That's the thing I want to keep." Grant crossed the distance between them. His hands found Jude's face, cold and wet and shaking, and tilted his chin up. His grip was careful. His eyes were not. "Tell me to stop," he said. "No." He kissed him. Soft at first, testing. Rain on both of them, limestone and wet slate and sage and marjoram all rising at once, mixing into a scent Jude had never smelled before and wanted to live inside. Jude's hands found Grant's shirt, fisted the wet fabric, pulled him closer. The kiss deepened. Grant's thumb traced Jude's jaw, the same line he had drawn weeks ago in the dark lab, and Jude made a sound against his mouth that was half sob, half giving up. Grant's lips moved from his mouth to his jaw, down the side of his neck. Jude felt teeth. Careful, not breaking skin, just pressure, grazing the scent gland at the joint of his neck and shoulder. His back arched off nothing. His scent exploded past the suppressants, marjoram and amber flooding the cold morning air, and Grant groaned against his throat, low and wrecked, and Jude felt the vibration all the way down his spine. "Not here," Jude gasped. "We are in public." Grant pulled back. His eyes were dark. His pupils were enormous. His breathing was ragged, and his hands were still on Jude's face, and the space between their mouths was less than an inch. "Come home with me," Grant said. "You just resigned. Where is home?" "My apartment. Hector's there. There's a couch and a blanket, and I will make you the worst coffee you've ever had because I cannot cook to save my life." Jude laughed. The sound was wet and raw and real. "That's a terrible pitch. I also have you. You have me. Then that's enough. That's more than enough." They stood in the rain for another 30 seconds, foreheads touching, breathing each other in, and the pull, the one Jude had been fighting since the day the vial opened, went quiet. Not gone. Just finished arguing. It had won. He kissed Grant again, slower this time. Deeper. The wet clothes, the cold air, Grant's mouth warm against his scent gland pounding at his neck like a second heartbeat. When they finally separated, Jude picked up Hector's carrier. Grant picked up his box. "You're going to have to come back for that data," Jude said as they walked. "The reversal protocol. You can't just let it disappear." "I deleted it." "You're a scientist who spent 7 years building a data set. You have a backup." Grant was quiet. Grant. "There may be an encrypted external drive in the box." "Of course there is." I was angry and dramatic. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. "You wiped the company servers." "I wiped the company servers. The personal backups are mine. They can't touch those." Jude looked at him. The rain was letting up. A thin line of gold was breaking through the clouds to the east, catching the wet rooftops of McDougal in sharp light. "We're going to rebuild it," Jude said. "The protocol, but differently this time, with consent built into every stage, with Omegas on the research team. With me, not as a subject, but as a collaborator." Grant stopped walking. He looked at Jude the way he had looked at the isolation room door, like he was on the wrong side of something and had just been told he could come through. "You want to work on this with me?" "I'm a lab tech with 3 years of sample processing experience and a designation change that gives me insider knowledge no other researcher has." "You need me." "I need you," Grant agreed, and the way he said it had nothing to do with research. 3 months later, Jude sat at a workstation in a rented lab space in Bushwick, running a pheromone analysis on a sample that Grant had prepared that morning. The lab was small. 4 stations, second-hand equipment, a coffee maker that produced liquid Grant described as technically coffee, and Jude described as proof of malice. Grant was at the adjacent station, writing a grant proposal. Hector was asleep on top of the centrifuge, which was not sterile protocol but which Jude had stopped fighting after the 3rd week. The research was slow, underfunded, built from scratch with the personal backup drive and Jude's meticulous notes and a growing team of 3, Jude, Grant, and a young Omega data analyst named Lena, who had left Genera after the board's handling of Jude's case became public knowledge. Marin had leaked it. Not the clinical details, not Jude's medical records, just the facts that Genera's board had attempted to enroll an Omega employee in a clinical trial without consent, and that the CRO had destroyed his own research rather than let it be used that way. The story had run in the Gothamist and then picked up by 2 national outlets that covered designation rights, and the resulting scrutiny had forced the board to restructure its ethics committee. Jude had not gone back to Genera. He had taken his spreadsheet skills, his steady hands, and his new designation to the rented lab on the east side, where the equipment was older and the funding was uncertain, but nobody was going to put his name on a form without asking him first. His suppressants were stable. His heat cycle, when it arrived for the first time 8 weeks after presentation, had been manageable, the new formulation holding it to 3 days of low-grade fever and heightened sensitivity rather than the crisis Dr. Moss had feared. Grant had stayed in the next room, close enough for his scent to provide grounding, far enough to maintain the boundary Jude set. That boundary had narrowed considerably since the restaurant on McDougal. They were together. That was the word they used because boyfriend felt too small and partner felt too clinical, and bonded was something neither of them was ready for, though Jude's body had already made that decision and was simply waiting for the rest of him to agree. Grant's fingers found his under the lab bench sometimes. During long analysis runs, when the centrifuge hummed and the data compiled and there was nothing to do but wait, Grant would reach across the gap between their stools and lace his fingers through Jude's, and they would sit like that, hand in hand, watching numbers populate a screen. And sometimes after hours, when the lab was locked and the equipment was powered down and the only light came from the exit sign above the door, Grant would press Jude against the workbench and kiss him until Jude's scent broke through the suppressants and the whole room smelled like them. Just them. Together. "Your hands are still the steadiest thing about you," Grant murmured against Jude's mouth one evening, his own hands tracing Jude's wrists, thumbs circling the scent glands there. "My hands are the only steady thing about me," Jude corrected, and arched into the touch and stopped pretending he did not want exactly this. On a Friday in March, Mrs. Cho saved his window seat. The soup was the same. The seat by the window was the same. But this time there was a second chair pulled up to the table, and Grant was in it, studying the menu with the intensity of someone decoding a genome. "Just pick something," Jude said. "You're overthinking it. There are 17 options. Get the spicy one. How do you know what I'll like? Because I know you." Mrs. Cho brought the bowls. She looked at Grant with the appraising eye of a woman who had been watching Jude eat alone every other Friday for 3 years and had opinions about it. "This is Grant," Jude said. "I figured." She set the bowls down. "He looks nervous. That's a good sign." "I'm not nervous," Grant said. "He's nervous," Jude confirmed. Mrs. Cho patted Grant's shoulder as she passed. "Eat. Nervous people need soup." They ate. Grant liked it, as Jude had known he would. Outside the window, the city did what New York always did in March, swung between freezing rain and pale sun like it could not make up its mind. Jude looked at Grant across the table. Bad coffee. 5-mile morning runs, murder mysteries, a cat named Hector, a brother he still missed, research he had burned to keep Jude safe. red pen corrections with a doctorate and no grasp of APA formatting, a thumb along a jawline in a dark lab that Jude still felt when he closed his eyes. Grant. I'm glad it was your vial. Grant looked up from his bowl. His eyes, gray-green and direct, met Jude's. His scent warmed, just slightly. Just enough. I'm glad it was your hands, he said. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time.